topic that I'm going to talk about today is all around leadership skills and dealing with people. So I'm going to share a few thoughts, a few ideas around how you can maybe increase the effectiveness that you lead your people. And I'm going to think about some attitudes, first of all, just share a few thoughts around attitudes that leaders maybe need to have. The skills, a few thoughts around some key skills that I think are useful, and some that I think are a mix of attitudes and skills. Actually, I found it a bit difficult to itemize them, so I call them attitudes and skills, which I'll share in a few minutes. Then I'm going to talk briefly about the top 5 areas that people tell me they struggle with in terms of managing and leading teams, and finish off with 10 tips, just my top 10 tips around leadership and management. So as usual, my purpose, my outcome here is to share some thoughts, to share some tips and help you become a more effective leader. And if you leave with just one idea of something that you can do to make a difference, then it's been worthwhile running the session. I'll be leaving plenty of time, I think, thinking about the content for today. There'll be plenty of time at the end for discussions and any questions or any issues that you want to share and raise that I can maybe help with as well. So we'll do that at the end as we usually do. So the first thing I want to think about is some key attitudes that I think are really important when it comes to leadership and looking after those people in your team. And the first thing that I start with is a little concept which I call the shadow of the leader. And this is particularly important, I think, when it comes to values in a team. And so the example here is that you will probably look up to see how your boss behaves in certain situations, certain circumstances, how they behave in line with the values. And you will make a decision as to how important you think they take those values. And that's your perception. And your team members will do the same to you. So they'll look up to you and say, well, we've got this value of integrity, or we've got this value of teamwork, but my boss doesn't really demonstrate that. So why should we bother? So you cast that shadow as a leader. So always think about, what shadow do you cast to your team members? When they look up to you, what's their perception? What do they think? What do they take away from how important you think things are? And as I say, you will do the same with your leaders as well. So think about that little concept about the shadow that you cast as a leader, first of all. Then, it's a bit of a jargon word, I think, at times, but think about authenticity. So be yourself. You can't be someone else. You can't pretend to be someone else. So I've worked for some great leaders in the past, but I'm not them. I can't do what they do in the same way. But what I can do is I can learn from them. I can see what they do that's really effective. I can see how they behave. I can see how they treat people. I can see the leadership tools and techniques they use, and I can deploy them and I can use them in my way. But I'm not them, so I can't act like them. I can't pretend to be them, because that's first of all, it's hard to do, but also people see straight through it. They say, that's not you, that's not Andrew. He doesn't do that usually. So take what you can from people that you admire in terms of how they lead teams and what they do, but how can I apply it in my own way? Use it in that authentic way. That's a second attitude I think is good to have. Be passionate and committed. Obviously, be committed to the role. Be committed to the team that you lead, and be passionate about what you do as well. Let people see that passion in terms of how you drive things forward. And be prepared. Have that attitude of taking accountability. So you're leading the team. Ultimately, you're accountable for what that team does and that team's performance. So don't pass blame down. You might have to, there's a bit of, I suppose it's kind of the buck stops here. If things go wrong, you might have to hold your hands up and say, yeah, okay, it was my fault. You know, I could have done things differently with the team. So be willing to take that accountability with the team and for its performance. And another important attitude I think to have is to be confident. There's nothing wrong with being confident. but be humble with it. Don't be arrogant about it. So find that balance of confidence between, it's kind of that midpoint between arrogance and humility. Don't be too humble about things. People like confident leaders, but they don't like arrogant leaders. So try and find that middle ground of being confident with your team when you're leading them. And be supportive. So help your team members to learn from mistakes. So if they don't get it right first time, give some feedback. And I think we'll talk about feedback in a few minutes. But be supportive and help people to learn from those mistakes. If they need training, if they need extra support, put that in there. Hopefully they don't keep making the same mistake again and again, but help them to learn from those mistakes and support them. And do what you say you're going to do. So have that honesty, have that integrity, so that if you say you'll do something for a team member, they know that you will deliver it. They know that you'll try your best to do that for them and deliver that. So do what you say, have that honesty, have that integrity. So those were a few thoughts around some attitudes that I think are important as a leader, as a team leader. And here are some thoughts around some key skills that you might want to think about. How do I stack up against these? Which areas do I really want to think about developing if I need to? So I think the first one that really underpins everything, whether that's face-to-face or whether that's online communication, whether that's working in a hybrid way with your team, so you spend some time in the office working with them, and you spend some time working remotely with them. Having that communication and those interpersonal skills are really key. They're kind of I think they're foundation for everything. So those listening skills, those questioning skills, those building the relationships with the team members, really fundamental to me. I think the nature of a job as a team leader as well is that you're there to solve problems for your team. So having some problem solving tools and techniques in your toolbox at your fingertips that you can pull out. So how could we solve this problem? You've got some methods of doing it. You've got some ways. So think about having a look at some problem solving techniques and how could I use those in my day-to-day work as a team leader. And then once you've solved those problems, you may well have to make decisions. And I think, again, decision making is key, because people look to their leaders to make decisions. So I would rather work for a leader who maybe made a wrong decision and then held their hands up and said, look, I made that decision with the information I had available to the best of my knowledge and understanding, but I actually got it wrong. What I should have done is this. I would rather work for a leader who does that than a leader who doesn't make a decision at all. I think that causes a lot of frustration in people if their leader isn't willing to make a decision. So if you do make a decision and get it wrong, hold your hands up, admit it, have some of that humble approach and be willing to admit that mistake. But I think really important to make decisions for your team and lead in that way. And then be willing to delegate. So take those things that you're asked to do and think about, how could I maybe delegate in a positive way? This isn't dumping things that you don't fancy doing on people. This is delegating for positive reasons, which might be helping your people develop in the team. It might be because it's more cost effective for someone else to do it. It might be because you just physically don't have time to complete something. You need to break it down into smaller pieces and delegate different things to different people and then pull it all together. But think about how you can delegate to your team members. And I understand this depends on team sizes and things like that, but you can also think about, is there anything I could delegate sideways or even upwards as well? Delegation doesn't always have to be downwards. So think about how you can use the people around you in a positive way and delegate some things out to them. Think about how you give feedback to people. So positive motivational feedback when people have done a great job. Tell them they've done a great job, but importantly, be very specific in terms of why they did a good job. What was it that they did so that they know to do more of it? So don't just say, thank you for that. That was great. Be specific around what they did, what you saw, what you heard them say, and then encourage them to do more of it. So have that sort of positive motivational feedback that has that positive spiral upwards. And then also be willing to give developmental feedback. Again, not for negative reasons, but for developmental reasons. So you're doing it for positive reasons to help people get better so that they can perform better in the organization. But again, be very specific with developmental feedback about what you saw or what you heard, and then work with them to think about what they could do differently next time to improve. And if they can come up with ideas themselves as to what could be done differently, then they're more likely to be committed. They're more likely to take ownership of that. So think about how you can give both positive, reinforcing, motivational feedback and developmental feedback to people. And then another part of the team leader role will probably be to resolve conflict, either conflict between team members potentially, or conflict between clients or service users and the team. So have some conflict management tools and techniques in your toolbox. And there's lots of stuff around, obviously, around the internet, around conflict management frameworks and tools and techniques. But have some of those at your disposal so you can address things before they become too big. Try and resolve those conflicts before they escalate and become very significantly damaging potentially to relationships. So having some conflict management skills are again, I think, very useful to have. And then you'll need to manage the performance of the people in your team as well. So you may not have formal appraisals or performance management processes, but you will still need to manage the people in the team from a performance perspective. So think about how you set their goals, how you set their objectives, and then how you measure them against those goals and objectives. And if they're going a bit off track, you can then bring them back on track. So think about how you manage performance. And again, if it is sometimes linked to salary and things like that, pay rises or career progression, then you maybe need to be a little bit more formal about that. But do you have some performance management skills again at your disposal there? And then the last group that I wanted to think about in this first section are things that I couldn't really fit in either an attitude or a skill. So I've just put them in a bit of a catch-all. So first of all, I think inspiring your people, I think this is a bit of a mix. So having that vision, where do we want to be as a team? Where do we want to be as an organization? And then being able to sell that team, sell that vision and that direction to your team members and inspire them to want to follow you. You can't force people. You can't have that kind of threatening environment that says you will follow me in this direction. What you can do is find and work out what motivates people, what inspires them, and provide that environment. And they can then choose to be motivated, choose to be inspired, and follow you in that direction to help you move towards that vision in the organization. So having some that inspirational skill and attitude, I think, is really important as a leader. Then I think you need to be approachable, you need to be available. So if they've got questions, if they're not quite clear on something, they need to know that they can come to you. So you need to be careful about balancing your time, but making it clear to people that kind of my door's open. Now, again, this is more difficult if you're working remotely, but having a conversation and say, if you do need to contact me, drop me a message and I'll get back to you as soon as possible and we'll have a catch up, we'll have a chat. So make sure that people know they can approach you and that you're available if they've got those questions. If they just need to check something, if they're not quite sure on something, for example, that you've delegated to them, you don't want them to carry on without checking. You want them to deliver what you need them to do. You don't want them to go off in the wrong direction if they're not totally sure. And show appreciation and recognition. And people want appreciation and recognition in different ways. So those of you who were on the last session around working styles and preferences, people have different preferences in terms of how they'd like to be appreciated or recognized. Some people want to be left alone and just carry on with the job. And I assume if I'm not doing a good job, you'll tell me. So they don't need a lot of interaction. They just want to be left alone, not micromanaged, maybe recognized for going beyond what they're paid to do. So sometimes people have that need. So I expect that you'll pay me to do the job, so I don't expect to be recognised anymore for that. But if I go beyond, I expect you to recognise it. Some people have that type of preference. Other people need a bit more appreciation, a bit more, I'd say, sort of positive strokes. Thank you for doing a good job. You're doing a great job. Keep going. That's sort of more, maybe a little bit more frequent interaction. They don't necessarily need the reward and recognition. They just need to be appreciated and to understand that they're doing okay. So again, you'll have people with different preferences in those areas. So think about who needs maybe a little bit more of that appreciation, that more constant thank you, you're doing a great job, and those people who actually just want to be left alone and recognized if they go beyond the role. So think about how you appreciate and recognize the people in your team. And then change management as well, something that we all have to deal with. How you deal with change as a leader is very important, I think, for your people. And again, I think there's a bit of a mix of your attitude to change. Some people are more comfortable with change than others. Some people are more comfortable with ambiguity than others. And again, that's linked to your style and your preference. But then also you need to have some change management skills, again, in your toolbox. And there are lots of frameworks and approaches that you can look up and use around how you can lead people through change. Some very famous ones. One is called the Kotter 8-step change. You might want to look at that. If you do deal with change, the Kotter change model is very useful to look at. It gives you a step-by-step process that you can follow. So you need to have some methods of approaching change. Now, I think you also need to have some self-awareness and some and growth, some personal growth. So understand where your strengths are, understand where your development needs are, and then how do I develop those? What can I do to develop those needs that I've got? So having that insight, and you might not need to develop all those areas. What you might choose to do is again, from a delegation perspective, for example, how can I delegate to people around me who are better than me at doing something? If I'm just rubbish at something, and actually it's not worth investing the time and the money in developing me to become maybe average, I could ask someone who's really good at it, who could do it very quickly. So think about how I can grow if I need to grow in certain areas and have that self-awareness. And then think about how you can coach people. And coaching is a bit of a trailer for our next session, actually. So next week we're going to be the topic is going to be coaching. So I'm going to be sharing a coaching framework with you. So coaching is quite different to mentoring and training. It's around helping people come up with their own ideas and their own solutions. So I'm not going to go into any more detail than that. Hopefully you'll be able to join us on the next session to think about how you can use coaching to help people develop. And it really gets that ownership and that engagement in a very positive way. So those were some thoughts around some attitudes, some skills, and some mixes of attitudes and skills that you might want to think about how you stack up against some of those. What am I good at? What could I maybe develop to make me even more effective as a leader? And so I'm just going to share now really 5 areas that people tell me are particularly difficult for them. They often come up when I'm working with people in terms of managing people and leading people. And some of these are kind of nothing to do with actually the people side, but they feed in kind of to how they are as a leader. So the first one that often comes up is time management. People really struggle with time management. I've just got too much to do. So how can you manage that time? How can you prioritize your workload? So think about, again, from a development perspective for you as a leader, do you need some input around how you manage your time and how you prioritize your work? The next area that people talk to me about as being a real need is how to manage meetings. So we waste so much time in meetings that we don't need to be in, or we have the wrong people in the meeting. We have people who really don't have a lot to contribute and don't take a lot away from it. So it wastes their time. But we get into this routine where we've always had a meeting at 9 o'clock on a Monday morning, so let's just have it. So maybe think about, how can I take a step back and say, if I had a blank sheet, what meetings do I really need to have with my team, with my board, with my service users? Do I need all the meetings that I've got at the moment? And what meetings do I really need to go to? Because again, we go to meetings that we have no real input or interest in, but we've always gone to them. So start to push back a little bit in a positive way. Start to challenge the meetings, start to question the meetings that you have and the meetings you go to, and see if you can take a few meetings out, maybe rotate attendance as well. It could help develop people if they go and represent you, but you need to allow them to make decisions on your behalf if you're sending them. But maybe you could look at different ways of saving your time and making your meetings more effective. Make them structured, have those agendas, make sure you know there's a clear purpose for those meetings that you're having with your team. So think about, what meetings do I really, really need, and who really needs to be there? Presentations often comes up as quite an issue for some people. So presentations are kind of a part of the leader's job, whether it's presenting to the team, whether it's presenting to the board, or presenting to clients or service users. People often have to make presentations and aren't particularly comfortable. So again, think about, do you need some development in that area that you can find to make you feel more comfortable, more confident in presentations. And then change comes up again on this area. People generally don't like change. People are not comfortable necessarily with ambiguity and not having that real clarity around how things need to be different. So thinking about those change management skills, learning a few change management tools and techniques can really help you be more comfortable as a leader of your team. And then finally, building that team together. So again, those of you who maybe were on the first session that we ran in this little series, Building the Exceptional Team, hopefully you'll have taken a few thoughts away there. But people sometimes think, how can I get my people working more effectively together? So again, thinking about those tools and those techniques that you can use. And again, just a little plug and advert for you, Jenny, but in a couple of sessions time, I've got I'm running a session on building strong teams, another topic in this series of training and tea. So you might, if you can join that session, you might find a few tools and techniques on that session that will help you, make you more comfortable building that team and developing that team, making them work more effectively together. So those are some things, again, those are probably the top 5 things that people tell me they struggle with as a team leader and as a team manager. So think about how you can maybe develop in some of those areas. And then I'm going to just share some top 10 tips, which really pull together some of the points that I've mentioned on this session so far. So I think the first one here is have that really clear vision, have that really clear direction for your team, so everybody knows why they're there. So one of the high performing team sessions topics I look at is really, why do we exist as a team? What's our purpose? So have that really clear vision, that really clear direction, so that people know why they're part of that team. And help people to see what's in it for me. So that WIIFM, what's in it for me? So that people have that real sense of purpose, that real why. Why am I part of this team? Now, I think for the sort of work that a lot of you do, that's a lot easier, because people really are part of your organizations because they see that purpose. That's very strongly evident. That's a strong thread throughout. That's maybe more difficult in maybe more some business situations. But if you can help your team members really see why they're part of that team, what the purpose is, that can really get that engagement with them. And again, sometimes people have different needs. So I might be in a team for different reasons to other people. So find out from a personal level what each of your team members wants from that team membership. Some it might be growth, some it might be wanting to give something back, something it might be a very much more personal reason. But if you can help people understand why they want to be part of the team, they're more likely to be engaged and take ownership and have that commitment there. Then thinking about that style and preference point, how do excuse me, how do people like to work? How do they like to communicate with each other? So really understanding the differences of the people that you've got within your team can really help to get that team effective and moving forward in a positive way. So working with people, just either taking them through a simple psychometric or personality test, or just getting them to talk one-to-one with you about how do you like to be communicated with, how do you like to be managed, how do you like to be checked up on, so you're not micromanaging people. So understanding those different styles and preferences, and then helping the team members to understand each other's, can be very powerful. The fourth one is around getting inputs and ideas. The team leader doesn't necessarily know everything. So seeking those ideas and valuing that membership, input from the team members is another way of getting that ownership, getting that inclusion, getting different views, getting that diversity of thinking, and make sure that you value those ideas, listen to them. You might not be able to action all of them, but recognize them, thank people for their contributions, and explain why you can't use them at the moment, so that people feel, yeah, you've heard me. I understand why you can't act on my idea at the moment, but I know you've listened, and I'll be willing to give more ideas in the future. The worst thing is if people give suggestions and ideas and they're just ignored, and people don't know whether you've listened to them or not. Nothing's happened. They're not going to contribute more ideas. So take those ideas and value them, and if you can't use them, if you can't deploy them, explain why you can't at the moment. And focus on what you want people to do, not how you want to do it. So this is a little bit around delegation as well. So if you want someone to do something, ask them, unless there's a reason like maybe a health and safety reason, or a certification reason, or a compliance reason that they have to follow a process. If people don't have to, ask them to do something, tell them what you'd like them to do and deliver, and then let them get on with it, because they might come up with a better way than you would have done it. Don't say, this is what I would do, this is how I want you to do it. Let them come up with their own way initially, and then you might get some improvements, you might get some new ideas coming through, because they'll come up with their own way. If they struggle, obviously you'll have to help them, but take that first step of let them get on with it, and this is what I want you to do, not how to do it. And then my final 5. Be available. Mentioned that on the previous slide. Again, be available to people on that informal ad hoc basis. Have some formal sessions set in the diary. So maybe whatever frequency works best for you, but once a month, once a week, whatever. We'll have a half-hour catch-up. But between those more formal sessions, if you need anything, get in touch. Let me know. Just ask. But be careful that you don't overload yourself as well. Manage your own kind of work balance there. It's almost try and avoid being too available, if that makes sense. But being available is, I think, really important. Another leadership role, I think, is to take away barriers, remove obstacles for people. I think you're there to find out what people's frustrations are, what the blockers are, what's stopping them performing as well as they could do, and then how can we take those away? Try and work with them, or work for them on their behalf to try and remove those barriers, remove those obstacles, so it makes things easier for people to work. Another communication one, really, listen more than you speak. So there's this kind of this perception that the best leaders are all extroverts and talk a lot and loud and so on. There's actually more research now that says more introverted leaders are better, because they actually listen. Introverts like to listen to people and reflect on it, and then they'll make their inputs. And that can be a very effective way of leading people. So listen to your team members, before you actually speak. And think about that as a technique to use. Give honest feedback, which I've talked about before, that positive, motivational feedback to make people, help people be better or even better. Do more of that because that was really good. And the developmental feedback to help them fill any gaps that they've got that they need to fill as well. And then finally, continue to develop yourself. Have a personal development plan for yourself and others. And again, the final session that we'll be running in this series is around how to put a personal development plan together for you and for your team members as well. So think about, make sure that you've got a personal development plan that you can use to help you develop, identify your own needs, but also have development plans for your team members as well. So those are some thoughts just around some tips that I think are particularly important there. So just to summarize, in terms of attitude, you choose the attitude that you have. We're all capable of choosing our attitude, but do we do that in a positive way? And also from a skills perspective, what skills do we really need to develop? Have a plan to develop those skills and then take some action. And don't try to do too much at once. Pick one or two actions that are going to have the biggest impact and then do them